She drove me home that night, but instead of saying goodbye, she whispered, "I'm not ready to leave yet." And in that quiet pause, everything between us changed. It had been one of those long evenings that seemed to stretch endlessly, the kind where the night air carries a certain stillness, like the world is holding its breath. The community center's lights were dimming as people slowly filtered out, their voices fading into the crisp autumn night. I stood by the curb, hands tucked into my jacket pockets, watching the condensation from my breath curl upward into the dark. My plan was simple: call a ride, head home, disappear into the quiet of my apartment. Nothing more. That's when I heard her voice behind me. "You need a ride?" I turned to see her leaning casually against the side of her car, keys dangling from her fingers. She wasn't someone who blended into the background. Even in something as simple as a navy trench coat and soft wool scarf, there was an effortless presence about her, composed, elegant, yet grounded. Her eyes held that kind of warmth that makes you pause, like standing near a fire after a cold walk. I hesitated for a moment, not wanting to impose, but she tilted her head slightly with a half-smile. "Come on, it's on my way," she added. So, I slid into the passenger seat. The car was warm, smelling faintly of cedarwood and something floral, like her perfume had settled into the fabric over time. As she started the engine, mellow jazz floated through the speakers, the kind that wraps around you without demanding attention. Streetlights streaked across the windshield in long golden lines as we pulled out onto the road. The conversation started light. We talked about the event we just attended, shared a few amused observations about people we both knew. Her laugh was easy and genuine, low, warm, unguarded. But as the miles slipped by, something subtle shifted. Silences began to fill the spaces between our sentences, not awkwardly, but comfortably. The kind of silences where neither person feels the need to fill the air because the presence alone is enough. I found myself stealing glances at her while she drove. The way her fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, relaxed, confident. The faint crease between her brows when she focused on the road. She hummed softly along with the music at one point, unaware of how intimate that small sound felt inside the cocoon of that car. The world outside was cool and distant, but in there, it was warm, almost suspended in time. She asked about my week, but not in that polite, passing way people usually do. She listened, really listened, eyes flicking toward me between turns, nodding thoughtfully at my answers. In return, I asked about hers, and she spoke with the kind of quiet honesty that comes when you're not trying to impress, just being real. It wasn't a grand conversation, but it carried a weight that I couldn't quite name. By the time the familiar outline of my street appeared, I realized I wasn't ready for the ride to end. And, though I didn't know it then, neither was she. When the car finally rolled to a smooth stop in front of my building, neither of us spoke at first. The engine idled softly, a low hum that seemed to fill the quiet between us. My apartment windows were dark, the entire street bathed in the pale glow of a single lamppost at the corner. It was the kind of still night where every sound felt amplified, the ticking of her turn signal, the faint rustle of leaves caught in a late breeze, the soft jazz still playing in the background. She shifted the gear into park but didn't reach for the keys. Her hand stayed on the steering wheel, fingers drumming a slow, thoughtful rhythm. She looked ahead for a few seconds, as if lost in some private thought, then turned toward me. The dashboard light cast her face in a warm, golden hue, gentle, almost cinematic. Her eyes lingered on mine a moment longer than they should have, and in that silence, something shifted. I cleared my throat lightly, unsure what to say. "Thanks for the ride," I murmured, breaking the spell for just a heartbeat. She gave a small smile, not forced, not automatic, the kind of smile that carries a hint of something unspoken behind it. "Well," she exhaled, leaning back against her seat, "here we are." But she didn't move. Normally, this is the part where people exchange polite goodbyes, a quick, drive safe and it's over. But instead, she just sat there, gazing at the building, then at the road, then at me again. It wasn't indecision. It felt more like hesitation laced with awareness, like she could feel the air between us had thickened with something neither of us had prepared for. Her right hand left the steering wheel and rested lightly on her lap. She wasn't fidgeting, she was holding herself still. As if moving too quickly would make the moment dissolve. I noticed the way she inhaled slowly, her chest rising under her coat, and then exhaled through parted lips, like she was steadying herself. I tried to lighten the air. "You can just drop me and escape, you know," I joked gently, but my voice was softer than I expected. She let out a quiet laugh, brief, but real. "Escape, huh?" she repeated, almost to herself. Then she turned the engine off, leaving only the music playing softly, wrapping the inside of the car in a warm, almost intimate quiet. Her gaze returned to me, steady this time. There was no flirtatious sparkle, no forced charm. Just something honest, a kind of openness that made me suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes when she smiled. I could smell the subtle mix of her perfume and the lingering warmth of the car. And in that pause, that single, quiet stretch of seconds, it was as if time pressed its finger against us, saying, "Pay attention." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But everything about that pause said more than words could. Something had begun to stir beneath the surface, and neither of us could pretend not to feel it anymore. The engine was off, the night outside completely still. The soft jazz drifting through the speakers felt louder now, like it had been waiting for this exact silence to make its presence known. She sat with both hands resting on her lap, eyes lowered for a moment as if weighing something deeply personal. Then she turned her head toward me, and for the first time that night, there was no polite mask, no effortless composure, just raw honesty. "I'm not ready to leave yet," she said quietly. The words slipped out like a confession she hadn't planned to voice. There was no flirtatious lilt, no playful undertone. Just a simple, sincere truth. Her voice was soft, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that lingers in the chest long after the sound fades. I didn't answer right away. Her eyes flicked briefly toward mine, searching, as if gauging whether she'd made a mistake by admitting it. The glow from the dashboard light painted her features in a warm amber tone, making the moment feel even more fragile. She leaned back against the seat, exhaling slowly, like someone who'd finally stopped holding their breath. Inside that parked car, it suddenly felt like the outside world had vanished. The streetlights blurred through the fogged edges of the windshield, and the low hum of distant traffic felt miles away. All that existed was her voice echoing faintly in my mind, "I'm not ready to leave yet." I turned slightly in my seat to face her. "You don't have to," I said quietly, my tone matching hers, not playful, not questioning, just honest. A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, not because I'd said something clever, but because she seemed relieved. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit I'd started noticing. Her fingers lingered there for a moment before falling back into her lap. "I didn't expect tonight to feel like this," she admitted, eyes drifting toward the windshield. "I thought it was just a ride." Her voice softened further at the end, almost disappearing into the music. She wasn't someone who revealed feelings easily, that much was clear. There was a quiet strength about her, but beneath it tonight was a tenderness I hadn't seen before. I watched the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, as though letting the words out had lifted something invisible. There was a quiet tension between us now, not uncomfortable, but alive. The longer we sat there, the more I felt it, the closeness, the shared warmth, the awareness of every subtle movement. She shifted slightly toward me, just enough for her perfume, warm, woody with a faint floral note, to drift closer. Our knees almost touched, separated by barely an inch of space. She glanced back at me then, and this time, she didn't look away. Her gaze held mine, steady, unguarded. Something in the air had changed. What started as a simple car ride had crossed an invisible line. And neither of us seemed in any rush to step back. Eventually, the air inside the car grew too warm, thick with everything unsaid. She reached for the door handle almost reluctantly, and when she stepped out, a cool wave of autumn night rushed in. The contrast was sharp, the kind that instantly wakes your senses. I followed her out, pulling my jacket tighter against the chill. Above us, the sky was a deep, velvety black, scattered with faint stars that peeked through the haze of the city's glow. The street was quiet. No passing cars. No voices. Just the distant hum of the main road and the rustling of dry leaves dancing along the pavement. She leaned back against the car, arms folded loosely, her breath visible in soft white puffs. The street lamp overhead bathed the scene in a muted amber light, outlining her figure with a gentle glow. "You have a nice neighborhood," she said softly, glancing toward my building. Her voice carried that easy calm of someone trying to fill the silence, but underneath it, I could sense something else, a hesitation she didn't quite want to name. "It's peaceful," I replied, stepping to stand beside her. Close, but not touching. The metal of the car behind us was still warm, radiating a faint heat through our jackets. Our shoulders brushed lightly when I shifted my weight. She didn't move away. Instead, she adjusted her stance just slightly, letting the closeness settle between us like it belonged there. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. The night wrapped around us, quiet and still. She tilted her head back to look at the sky. "I used to love nights like this," she murmured. "When everything slows down, and you can actually hear yourself think." I watched her profile in the lamplight, the way her eyes softened when she stared upward, the relaxed line of her jaw, the faint, thoughtful smile that touched her lips. It wasn't flirtation. It was presence. Honest and unguarded. Without realizing it, I mirrored her posture, leaning back against the car, looking up at the same stretch of sky. Our arms were close enough that the fabric of our sleeves brushed whenever either of us breathed a little deeper. Each accidental touch lingered in my awareness, sending small ripples through the calm. She glanced at me from the corner of her eye and caught me looking at her. Instead of looking away, she held my gaze for a heartbeat longer than expected, her lips parting slightly as if about to say something, but then she didn't. She just smiled, faint and quiet, as if we both understood that words might ruin the simplicity of this moment. A gust of wind swept through, carrying the faint scent of rain from somewhere distant. She shivered almost imperceptibly, rubbing her hands together. I instinctively reached out to warm them, then stopped halfway, unsure. She noticed the motion, though, and gave me a look that wasn't quite permission, but wasn't a rejection either. Just knowing. The night was cold, but standing there beside her, I felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through me. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of warmth that settles deep, the beginning of something neither of us planned for, but both quietly welcomed. The quiet stretched between us, not as a void but as something gentle, like a soft blanket neither of us wanted to lift. She slid her hands into the pockets of her coat, shoulders drawn in slightly against the chill, and exhaled a slow, visible breath that curled into the night air. Her eyes were on the street ahead, but her mind. I could tell it was somewhere deeper. "You ever have nights that just catch you off guard?" she asked suddenly, her voice low. I turned toward her, sensing this wasn't small talk. "Yeah," I replied. "The kind you don't see coming, but end up remembering for a long time." She gave a quiet laugh at that, soft, almost bittersweet. "Yeah. Exactly like that." Her gaze drifted to the pavement, and for the first time that night, her composure slipped just a little. She wasn't the calm, self-assured woman behind the wheel anymore. She looked more real. Vulnerable, even. "Lately, I've been feeling like life's on repeat," she admitted. "Same places, same faces, same quiet house at the end of the day. It's like everything slowed down, but not in a peaceful way. More like." I stopped moving. Her words hung in the air like mist. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. She tilted her head slightly, as if embarrassed by her own honesty. "Sorry. That's a lot to unload on someone after a ride home." I shook my head. "Don't apologize. I get it. Really? Something softened in her expression then, a subtle shift, like a door opening a fraction wider. She leaned her shoulder lightly against the car again, closer this time. I didn't expect tonight to feel like this, she confessed. I thought it was just another evening. But here I am, standing in your street, talking about things I don't usually say out loud. I glanced at her hands, still tucked into her coat, and then at her face, the way the streetlight caught in her eyes, making them glimmer faintly. I'm glad you did, I said quietly. I don't think either of us saw this night coming. Her eyes met mine then, fully, steady, searching. There was a weight in that look. Not the heaviness of sadness, but of recognition. Of two people standing in the same unplanned moment, fully aware of it. She shifted a little closer, her shoulder now brushing mine without hesitation. The warmth from her body was subtle, but it felt like it anchored us both in that still street. She let out a soft breath and whispered, "It's been a long time since I've felt this, seen." I didn't have the perfect words to answer, so I gave her the truth, "Me too." Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was thick with understanding. She looked down and smiled faintly, almost shyly, like someone rediscovering a part of themselves they'd forgotten existed. For a brief moment, the rest of the world didn't matter, only the quiet between us, the night air, and the gentle rhythm of two hearts beginning to speak without needing sound. The night had settled fully by now. A soft breeze swept through the street, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant rain. She shifted her weight slightly, turning toward me more fully, her coat brushing softly against my arm. Up close, I could see the faint sheen of the streetlight reflecting off her eyes, turning them into warm pools of amber. She looked at me, not with expectation, but with quiet awareness. The kind that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. Her hand rose slowly to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. It was such a simple gesture, but it revealed a flicker of nervousness she'd kept hidden all evening. My eyes followed the movement, and before I could stop myself, my hand lifted too, mirroring hers. Our fingers brushed midway. The touch was light, fleeting, but it sent a warmth through me that lingered longer than the contact itself. She didn't pull away. In fact, her hand stayed there, resting gently against mine for a second longer than it needed to. Her gaze held mine, steady and soft, as if silently asking a question neither of us had put into words yet. The air between us thickened, but not with urgency, it was slow, deliberate. She exhaled, and the sound was barely more than a whisper. Her other hand slipped from her pocket and found its way to my arm. Just above the elbow. Light at first, as though testing the space between us. Then her fingers curled slightly, not gripping, just holding. The fabric of my jacket rustled faintly under her touch. Her thumb began to trace a small, unconscious arc against the sleeve, like she was memorizing the moment without meaning to. My chest tightened, not in discomfort, but in that rare way when something real is happening and your heart recognizes it before your mind can catch up. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the silence do the talking. She took a slow breath and stepped half a pace closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her, wrapping around me like a quiet, steady pulse. Her perfume drifted upward, soft, woody with that lingering floral note, and for a moment, everything around us faded. The street, the lamp, the night, they all became a backdrop. The only thing that felt alive was this fragile space between her hand and my arm, between her steady gaze and my quiet stillness. Her eyes searched mine, not for permission exactly, but for reassurance. I gave a small, honest smile. Not big, not forced, just real. And that was enough. She leaned in ever so slightly, not closing the distance fully, but enough that her forehead almost rested against my temple. Her hand stayed on my arm, warm and steady, as if anchoring herself there. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture. It wasn't loud or cinematic. It was quiet. Real. Intimate in a way that words could never replicate. For a long, suspended moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the wind brushing through the trees, and the rhythm of two people standing closer than they ever had before, realizing neither of them wanted to step back. Eventually, reality began to seep back in, softly, like light through a curtain. She glanced down at her watch, a faint crease forming between her brows. "It's late," she whispered, almost like she was trying to convince herself rather than me. Her hand was still resting lightly on my arm, warm against the night's chill. Neither of us made the first move to pull away. She finally let out a quiet sigh, the kind that carries both reluctance and acceptance. "I should go," she said, but her voice lacked its usual certainty. It wasn't a goodbye, it was an acknowledgement of time, not feeling. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, probably." But neither of us stepped back. For a moment, we just stood there under the amber streetlight, two silhouettes in the cool night. Her eyes held mine, and something unspoken passed between us, something that didn't need to be rushed or explained. She finally dropped her hand from my arm, fingers trailing against the fabric for a heartbeat before fully letting go. The absence of her touch left a quiet echo on my skin. I walked with her back toward the driver's side of her car. The rhythmic click of our shoes against the pavement was the only sound, steady and unhurried. She opened the door and paused, her hand resting on the frame as she looked at me from over her shoulder. There was a softness in her gaze now, a warmth that hadn't been there at the start of the evening. "Tonight, felt good," she said simply. No embellishment. No forced sentiment. Just honest, gentle truth. "Yeah," I replied. "It did." She smiled then. A small, real smile that reached her eyes. She slipped into the driver's seat but didn't start the engine right away. She leaned slightly toward the open window, resting her elbow on the edge. I moved a step closer, enough for our hands to meet naturally at the side of the car. Her fingers brushed against mine, deliberate this time. Neither of us looked down, we just let that soft contact speak for itself. "Drive safe," I murmured, though it came out quieter than intended. She gave a tiny nod, still holding my gaze. "Good night," she whispered. "Good night." She finally started the car, the low hum breaking the stillness we'd been wrapped in. As she shifted into gear, I stepped back, hands sliding into my jacket pockets. The headlights washed over the street, illuminating the damp pavement, and slowly, she pulled away. I stood there beneath the streetlight, watching her taillights fade down the road. There was no dramatic wave, no longing cry, just a quiet sense that something between us had shifted, subtly but permanently. As the night grew still again, I realized I wasn't smiling like someone in a movie. I was just, breathing differently. Lighter. A little more awake than before. This wasn't a love story written in grand gestures. It was something quieter, something that began in a simple ride home and lingered in the spaces between words, in the warmth of a touch, in the pause before a goodbye. And as I finally turned to head inside, I knew one thing for sure, whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot.